Today is Elul, Samech Tes class. Samech Tes. We'll be doing Samech Tes with Rabbi Gaffney on page Mem Ches.
You said you'd all three. Alright, so we saw the two madrigas in the Shem Havaya. We saw there was the union of Shem Havaya to Le'ela and Shem Havaya to Latata. Well, that was the two shemas in the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim that Moshe Rabbeinu said according to Rashi, or the Avisha said according to the other Mephoshim, by the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim after the Cheta Ego, that Havaya Kel Racham Chanun. And so we saw that those what was the necessity for saying the Shem Havaya twice, because it indicated two levels in Shem Havaya itself. And one was called the Shem Havaya of the lower level, Shem Havaya to Latata, and the base was Shem Havaya to Le'ela, the higher level in the Shem Havaya. So then we went on to say that Shem Havaya to Latata, Ubechina Shem Havaya Dishtaushlas. Now, the union of Shem Havaya Dishtaushlas means how the Shem Havaya is Be'ika, what you might call Mahave. It brings about the whole union, the union of Dishtaushlas. That's what we see, that the general view or taich of the word Havaya is being, or bringing into being. Havaya means to bring into being. And it's from the word Hoveh, which means to be or being. So Yud Kei Vav Kei is the idea of making being. So that indicates that the Shem Havaya is at least in some way a mocker for the whole union of Seder Shaushel, so the whole union of the creation. It must have some connection. He said the whole word Havaya is connected with the union, the whole Shem Havaya connected with the union of Nisavas or Elamet. And therefore he says that the first level in the Shem Havaya is connected with the Seder, the Shaushel or Elamet. Vainu, that means to say, B'chinas ha'oyer, shebo b'chinas tzimtzum, di'eis be'erech ha'elames, v'yislabish b'teichom rach yezam. In other words, that's a oyer which comes through a union of tzimtzum, which means reduction and retraction, in order that it should be be'erech, it should have some state of readiness or ability to be in an oven von lislabish beteich ha'elames, to enter the elames bislabshes and to give them chayes. Now that means to say that when we say the union of tzimtzum, then we don't necessarily mean the tzimtzum arishon, the original concept of tzimtzum. We mean that after there's already a beginning at the Seder of Olam, Yishtaushel as Olam is, then from each Olam and from each level in each Olam there's a tzimtzum to the one Lamata Himenu. And therefore it's called the Zo'er, which is bore continuously in a form of tzimtzum, in order that it should be Be'erach. Be'erach meaning on a basis of level or comparison to the Olamas, that it should be mislabish be'teichom lahachi yosam, to give them their chayas, and that means that it's bepnimius ha'elamas. It enters the elamas like a oil in a kli, like a oil to a kli. V'shem havaya zev shebederek klau hu koilo daled elamas atzilas bria yetzira asiyah. On this particular level of the Shem Havaya, which is the Shem Havaya Sakti Shtaushelas, it contains in itself Koilo, the Dalet Elames, Atzilas Bria Yetzira Vasiyah. In other words, that the Shem Havaya itself is a general state which carries in itself pratim all the four elements, meaning that all the four elements are like four details inside the general oil of the Shema Havaya. Now that doesn't mean to say that Shema Havaya is a makif aleihem. It includes in itself four different stages or four different levels, each of which is mashpia to a different olam. And so all of the four of them, as it were, make up the completion and the shleimus of the Shema Havaya. That's a famous work from the Arizal. The Dalet Oilamus Atzilas Bria Yetzira Asiya Hein Havaya Achas. They are like one expression of the Shema Havaya. How is that? Yud is Shaitu Oilama Atzilas. Hey Shaitu Bria. Vov B'Yetzira. The Kei Acharena B'Asiya. In other words, that the four elements, each of them has a Kabbalah receives chayes from a particular level of the Shema Havaya. And it's one on the din of Yud is Chochma, and Chochma is Shayachina Atzilas, because Atzilas is Beklalas the union of Chochma, and this is one on. The Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya in Perek Lamed Vov, in Perek Lamed Tes, in the famous Hakua, that the union of Chochma is Meir B'Kol HaAtzilas. And that's to say the highest Uis in the Shema Havaya is shy to the highest Olam, what that's union, so that the Iker Chayas of Atzilas is from the Yud of the Shema Havaya. Now that doesn't mean to say that there's no other details in Atzilus apart from Chochmah, but the Iker Hashpoah of the whole of Atzilus is from Chochmah, and therefore we see that Atzilus is an Elam which is bought over Kolul in Elikut. So therefore the union of Chochmah is the union of Bittul, as is one known, that it's Bittul of Iskalul is Mamish in Elikut. Therefore, the Yud is shy to Atzilus, and that's very important because it's well known that Atzilus is different than the other elements in that Atzilus is Mamish Elakus. Mashenkin Bria Yetzira Vasiya, they're already Nivroim, already things which are created from Elakus. Therefore the Yud being as it is a Nakuda, we're going to see more about the union from Nakuda, and it's bottled Gamri to the union of Lamail Himenu. It's got no Matthias, as it were. It's bottled, but Matthias, therefore it's shy to give the highest to Atzilus, which is still Elikut. Shenkin Bria is already in of Nivroim, therefore that's the union of K. What the K is already expression, but it's got a shape and length and breadth. Well, that's the union of K, the Bria, meaning the Bria is already a broadening out of the Shefa into a form and a shape, but that's the union of Bina and Bria. Huh?
Gesundheit.
Gesundheit?
No, he sneezed, so I said blessing.
Huh? שבבחינת בבריאה, Vav is B'Yetzira, and Yetzira is already the union of Midas, as is one on, and therefore the Vav is the union of the Vav Midas. The Pe'ikah, there are 6 Midas, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. Malchus is also nickel in the Midas of Malchus, sorry, another union apart from the Midas. Therefore the Vav is Meir in Yetzira, and the K Achreina, or that's the union from Malchus of the Shema Havaya, or that's Shah to Asiya. That's Meir in the union of Elam Asiya. And once again we see that the K has gotten itself a breadth and an expansion more than the other Oisias. The same, the Ashpa into Asiya makes the whole Elam till you get to Elam Azeh Agashman, which is already in the form of a Yesh. So that's Klolius, the Shem Havaya embraces all the four Olamas and is mashpia to the different Olamas. But with der Prat, in a more specific way, the union for Shem Havaya is shot to the Olama Atzilas itself. In other words, that was talking in a general way, which, as we saw, sweeps over and spans over all of the Arba Olamas. Or in a more particular way, the union for Shem Havaya is shot to Atzilas. I just said that it's shot to the union for the Savas of the Olamas, and the Staubschulas Olamas. As like we've had on many occasions, even here in this Emshech, the Olam HaAtzilus is the Ika Mamutza between Ein Sof and all the other Olamas, that they literally have the Shoresh in Olam HaAtzilus. Therefore, generally speaking, the Shem Havaya all the other Olamas, or in a more specific way, the Gilu, the Shem Havaya shot to Atzilus, and it's shot to the Esesphiras how they are in Atzilus, and they're like a mamutza, they're like a middle point through which all the Shefa goes, Balawachi, through Malchus into Olamas Bria, Yitzirah, Asiyah. And therefore he says, Bedera Pratu Esesphiras Atzilus, Yud B'chochma, Kei Babina Chulu. And he doesn't bother to go into the other details, which Vav is in the Midas, and Kei Achrena in the Inu for Malchus. So that's, generally speaking, the Indian the Shaykhs with the Shem Havaya Delatata to Atzilus, but the Prat, and generally speaking to the holy Savas of the Olamas. For Indian, the Indian Chochma, he begins Nakuda. The Indian Asfiras HaChochma, if we talk about it individually, is an Indian from a Nakuda, Sheramayla Adayin Bechinas Hasoga V'Havona. It's completely beyond the whole Indian of understanding. Yeah, what Hasoga is grasped, that's like the Indian of the appearance in the mind of grasping of the Hasoga. And Havona is when you bring it into the details and you can say, and you analyze it into details more, and you can say you really understand it. That's Indian from Havona. Because Hasoga is like the idea of grasping it, and Havona is like the idea of developing it into full understanding. So Chochma is beyond all that for the time being. So B'chinas Tfisa, B'chinas Ispashtas Erva, I'm sorry, that the Indian of Sheramayla min B'chinas Hasoga V'Havona, what is Hasoga V'Havona? That's the Indian from Tfisa, B'chinas Ispashtas Erva Reichem. That the Indian of Hasoga V'Havona, their Indian is grasp, that you grasp the Seichel. B'chinas Ispashtas, it spreads out into Oirech V'Reichev. Oirech means length, and Reichev means breadth. In other words, when a thing comes into Bina, you have it in different expansions. Oirech meaning the Indian could go down from level to level in the same Hasoga itself. And Reichev is that it spreads out into all sorts of different ideas and links with other ideas, the idea of breadth and expansion. So he said, that's the Indian Hasoga. But he said, Nakuda, being the Indian from Chochma, is Lamaila Adayin Mizeh. It's completely beyond that altogether. Kamoyal Derech Mosho, Aborak, Shemavrik Beha'ora Piseimiyas, like a lightning flash, which, how do you call it, appears, it flashes, Mavrik, it flashes, Ha'ora Piseimiyas with a sudden flash, how do you call it, a sudden reflection. When you look at a lightning flash, and it flashes in the heavens, but it doesn't sort of settle anywhere. It doesn't have any, it doesn't sort of settle in any place, or it doesn't fill up any keli or anything of that nature. It just flashes in the heavens and then, as it were, disappears. And that's called a borach ha-mavrik, a flash which flashes. So it is the beginning of all reasoning, which is chokhmah, or it's a lightning flash and like a general survey, something general and just a huge general glance at the inyan of the seichel. Skira means like a general survey at the inyan of the seichel. V'zehu ha'inyan she'achachma hi ois yud, and that's why it is that chachma is davke the letter yud of the Shem Havaya. Hainu, he said, bechinas nekuda shelamayla mea. In other words, what does a nakuda indicate? A nakuda indicates that something which is an intense, what you might call dot, which is lamayla miasok. In other words, it's so intense that it can't come into any form of revelation. Therefore, it's like an intense entity of something which is beyond explanation. That doesn't mean it's just got everything together so generally. Excuse me, I wouldn't mind, I like people looking at me through their fingers. So I don't like you looking at me through your fingers. You have to pay attention and not cover your face with your hand. So, there's a mirror. It's not the pshat that it's just like a general statement of the whole Hasoga. It's an intense entity which is really beyond Hasoga altogether. And therefore, in order to bring it into details, into Bina, you've got to go through a further inyan of Tzimtzum. The truth is. And therefore, it's not just a general, as it were, general rule with all the details that are going to come out of it, but it's an intense, essential entity which is really beyond the whole grasp of Seichel. And that's called Nakuda. That's one inyan in Nakuda. And that's what Chokhmah is. So therefore, Mitzad Echad, Chokhmah is the beginning of understanding. Because when the mensch gets that Baruch HaMavrik, he feels that he's got something. In other words, he feels that he's got the idea. But if you say to him, okay, explain it to me, I can't do that either. I've got to wait until I get it into my mind more. But I feel that I've experienced the Seichel. So that's what's called Baruch HaMavrik. It's called like a lightning flash, which is an intense gilu of the atzmius of the Seichel, of not a general rule of the Seichel. Not just a general rule for which details are going to come out. So that's one inyan in what we call Nakuda Sachok. So now, so the Rebbe, וזהו עניין שהחוכמה היא איש יוד שהוא נקודה למעלה מהסוגיה. אמנם עניין הנקודה היא מוירה גם כן על בחינס הצמצום בשביל עיסאוויס החוכמה. But a nakuda as another inyan to it, that it's also indicatory of how Chokhmah came about. In other words, that there's two ways now we're going to look at this idea of the Nakuda. There's two views of the Nakuda. One is that I'm looking at the Nakuda legavi the Makablim, legavi Bina. But Bina is the Makabel, and eventually Bina becomes Habona, and eventually it goes down into Midas, and it goes through the whole Seder. Well, those other lower koifes are called Makablim. They're the receivers from the Nakuda. So legavi the receivers, the Nakudas are a Nakuda because he's beyond their reach, he's beyond their inyan of Havana Vasuk. However, another look at the Nakuda is legavi where it came from. So what is the relation of the Nakuda to where it came from? And why is it a Nakuda legavi where it came from? In other words, that it's also a Nakuda legavi where it came from, and it's a Nakuda legavi the Makablim. But the mashmuas of those two ideas in the Nakuda are different. And therefore he says that the inyan of the Nakuda is also indicatory of the way that came about, and that's in of Tzimtzum Bishvil Isavasa Chokhmah. But in order to bring about the coming into being of Chokhmah, that's what we call making of Chokhmah, there was a Tzimtzum. Ki we just saw that Chokhmah was at least the beginning of revelation to the receivers. one of the Bina. Eventually, from Chokmah, you will eventually get into Bina, albeit through another form of Tzimtzum. Of a Sokosof, you've already made a preparation for one of our Asok. He said, Validei Ribu Ayishtaushlas, and through many levels of Ishtaushlas, there'll also be Chokmah in Bria, Yetzirah, and Olam Asiyah, Ad Isavas Aseichel Nushi, until there be also Chokmah Lamata in the Bnei Adam, in the Mensch Lamata, human Seichel. In other words, it's all the way down from Chokmah Eloah and Atzilus all the way down into Chokmah's Bnei Adam, the Inyan from Chokmah of Seichel and Nushi. So there was the Rebbe, since that Nakuda is going to open itself out and undergo a whole series of Ishtaushlas, Ad Kedei Kach, and therefore he said that how did it come about from the Eibishter, who is Ein Seif. Yela Maila Me'atzilas is Oyer Ein Seif HaMa'atzil, the Eibishter is Ein Seif, and he brings about Atzilas. But he's Ein Seif and completely moved up from all these Madregas of Ishtaushlas. So there was the Rebbe, how do you get the Inyan of Chokmah from Oyer Ein Seif? So therefore he says, Lozoish, Yisavas, Oyer Ein Seif HaMa'atzil, Hu alidei hatimtum. And therefore, in order to get the Inyan of Chokmah, there has to be a Inyan from Tzimtzum in order to produce Chokmah, from whence that Chokmah will then be mishtaushel into other levels, and eventually into Seichel and Ushi Lamata. So there was said, that Tzimtzum Hazeh, Inyan HaTzimtzum Hazeh, Hu b'chil siluk ha'atzmus kaviyochel. Deliesh HaChokmah hi ba'ein ha'reich legabe ha'atzmas, Lazeis, I efshaliyah Yisavas HaChokmah alidei b'chinas Yisavas HaChokmah alidei b'chinas Tzimtzum u'miyut levad, to a Inyan of Tzimtzum and lessening only, Shezeh Inyan HaTzimtzumim of Seidei Ishtaushlas, Ki im b'chinas Tzimtzum otzum. There has to be a tremendous Tzimtzum, Shehu Inyan Siluk Oyer HaAtzmas, the withdrawal of the essential oil of the Ein Seif Ma'ila Me'atzilas, all to get a Siluk Oyer HaAtzmas. In other words, that if you want to get Chokmah as a first level in Seder Olam HaAtzilas, you have to have a Tzimtzum of withdrawal completely of the previous level, which was the Ein Seif Shalom Ma'ila Me'atzilas, and then you leave over, as it were, a Nakuda, and then from that Nakuda there can be later a development, and like we saw, from one level to the other, further Tzimtzum. But those Tzimtzumim are what are called Miyut. They're only like a lessening of the earth. They're not a complete, as it were, withdrawal of the earth altogether. But in order to bring about the beginning of Chokmah itself, then there had to be a Tzimtzum in an oven of Siluk HaAtzmas. Due to the fact that Chokmah is Ein Arech, it has absolutely no basis of status or comparison, whatever. Like Gabi HaAtzmas, therefore, EF Shaliyah is Yisavas HaChokmah alidei a normal Tzimtzum, as you might call it, a Tzimtzum Umiyut Levad. That's the Tzimtzumim, how they are in Ishtaushlas. Ki'im, it has to be a Tzimtzum Otzum, a tremendous withdrawal, Shehu Inyan Siluk HaAtzmas. So now that's similar to what we find by the Tzimtzum HaRishon. That by the Inyan of the Tzimtzum HaRishon, and we differ the Tzimtzum HaRishon from all the other Tzimtzumim in Seder Shtausas, so we said the Tzimtzum HaRishon was a withdrawal, a complete withdrawal of the and the Inyan from Amokim Panui, as we call it, on many occasions. And then from there you have the Gilui HaKav, and the whole Rishon comes after the Inyan of the Rishima, as it brought down, it's a whole series of Inyanim going to get to the Tzimtzum HaRishon. And we say that Tzimtzum HaRishon is different than the Tzimtzum of other Tzimtzumim in Seder Shtausas. So now we're saying a Chiddush Dova, that even the Tzimtzum from L'mayla me'atzilas to Atzilas, which is already after the Tzimtzum HaRishon, it's already inside the Seder HaDe'elamas, in order to bring about the Inyan, the Gilui HaChokmah from L'mayla me'al Chachma, there has to be a similar type of tzimtzum, a siluk and a withdrawal from the how it was ad Atzilus. In other words, the inyan from Arich, or the inyan of Chachma Stimoya, like we saw before. Here we saw inyan from how do you call it? What do we call Parsa? Nothing else in Yon. Over here, the Rebbe is Mechadish. Alaf, we said that there was a inyan from Parsois, from the Inyanim. Well, the truth of the matter is to actually produce the inyan at the Nakuda, how it is Mamish and Atzilus, there has to be a siluk which is very similar to the inyan of the Tzimtzum, the Tzimtzum Rishon. From that we see that this is already the inyan from the Nakuda, Gabi Lamayla Himeno. In other words, this is what we might call the Nakuda Milmatala Lamayla. We had before the Nakuda Milmata Lamayla. I'm sorry, Milmayla Lamata. We had the Nakuda how he is, and then I go from the Nakuda downwards. And now we're saying, we're looking at that Nakuda, and we're saying, how did he come from? Lamayla Himeno. In other words, we're going from the Nakuda up to the. In other words, there's two different views of the Nakuda. Since we want to get from Eirein Seif, Mamish, Lamayla Me'atzil, we want to end up with a Nakuda, which is able to become a Mokeh for Ishtalshlis, then we have to have a Siluk, we have to take away, as it were, the whole Gilui of the Eirein Seif that we had up to now. And that's similar to the inyan of the Tzimtzum Rishon. And that's what he writes now in bracket. But it's not to be confused with the Tzimtzum Rishon. But the Tzimtzum Rishon, they're not a level in Tzimtzumim altogether. This is bedugma to the Tzimtzum Rishon. Because the Tzimtzum Rishon doesn't leave over an akuda like Chochma, it doesn't leave anything. It leaves what we call a Mokum Ponovi. That's a whole slightly different idea. Or Kemoi Bechinas Tzimtzum Harishon. Therefore, it's similar to that idea. Shuin in Siluk Oyer Hagodel Alatzad. That's a series of abbreviations for the Lashon of the Eitz Chaim. When you get to the Tzimtzum Harishon, that's a Siluk of the Oyer Hagodel Alatzad. Yeah, the putting aside of the great light on the side. V'akavana hi she'atzimtzum harishon, and the kav which later was nimshach from the tzimtzum harishon, ha'ikahu b'shvil ha'amshocha d'mamaliko almin. The whole ikar purpose of that was to bring about a mokeh for what will later become the inyan of the pnimi, the mamaliko almin, and that was the inyan of the kav. The kav is the mokeh of mamaliko almin, as well known. Mashikin Seiviv Kol Almin. Seiviv Kol Almin is the which was mistalek, as it were, which withdrew from the Chalol and from the Mokeh of the Kav. And that's called the inyan of the Godel, we just called, and that's Seiviv Kol Almin. But the inyan of the Tzimtzum was in order to get to the Kav, which is the Mokeh of the Mamalik Kol Almin. Mashikin B'chinas Seiviv Kol Almin. Who am shocha milmayla me'atzimtzum mibchinas ha'igul hagodel shelifnei hakav. Or igul hagodel means how they are attracted, and it remained in the form of igul, as it were. Well, that igul hagodel, that's the air that retracted with the tzimtzum and left the mokum ponim. A seivul kalamin comes from there. Remember, that's in the original tzimtzum, and that's in order to get to the inyan of the klolos inyan of mamalikolam. However, the inyan for Chochma here is a slightly lower level. It's not the inyan of the Nakuda here, is not the Nakuda which is Nimshach Tekav. This is the inyan of the Shurish and the Mokeh of Chochma. We made a Tzimtzum in order to make a Mokeh of Chochma, and that Chochma is like a Nakuda, Bilvat the Gabi Deir Shehoya Mikudim. So in that regard, it's similar to the Tzimtzum Harishon. But not that we're mamish comparing them, but we're saying that they're bedimian, because here, after the tzimtzum, we're left over with an akuda, which is after all a mokeh to order to the inyan of Seidish Taushel. By the tzimtzum harishon, you still got a tremendous way to go before you get to any mokeh to Seidish Taushel. And the first says that that's the dimian, and therefore he says kamoi. In other words, it's a similar concept, but it's not mamish the same meaning. Now, he says, this is like in the form of a kasha. In other places it's mavua. The amshocha, the chokhmah, he shaloi alidei timtum. The amshocha of chokhmah is not through timtum. I am mashu koshim bozeh b'diba amaschu matzazu, but it's a maim of Pesach, Reish Mem Zayin. Now, as far as I know, we don't have that maim. We don't have that hemshach or whatever it was. So I'm not able to look up to and tell exactly what was written over there. However, Hainu, he said, that means to say, what do we mean that the Amshocha Chokhmah is loyal at Timtum? He said, Hainu means ain't safe, mamish, shemeir b'chokhmah. Who beginners pnimius ha-chokhmah. Or that's the inyan of pnimius ha-chokhmah. So, Lafizah Kumta is that there is a level in Chokhmah which is loyal at Timtum. And this whole inyan of the siluk of the oil, in order to leave behind our nakuda, what for nakuda there'll be seidish taucheles, or that's chitzonius ha-chokhmah. That's not pnimius ha-chokhmah, ela chitzonius. Of a pnimius ha-chokhmah mamish, or that comes from the area say shaloy al timtum. Now that's mavur in Havi Mekemis in Siddur, many places in Siddur, not just in that hemshah of Matzazu, and in some above Bariches and in Ayin Beis and many of the big hemshachim from the Rebbe. And that's what we have a famous statement from the Arizal in the Kisvei Arizal, where he says, "Pnimius Abba, he pnimius Ati." The pnimius of Chokhmah is the pnimius of Keser. And he says, "V'lo yadati hatam." He said, "I heard that from my Moyer Shemati Mimoyer Rizal." He heard that from the Rizal. And he said he doesn't know what is the view of it. And he said, "V'lo havi noisi." In another place he writes that "V'lo havi noisi." I didn't understand how that can be. Oh, that's what he told me. So I just had to be makabel. Well, the Fisekum is that there's a madrega in Chokhmah which ain't no chanami. The Fi Seder Hanomali, or the Fi Seder Harogil, doesn't make any sense in Seichel and in Avona. How that can possibly be? In other words, that the Etzeminian or the Pnimius HaKeser, or that itself becomes the union of Chokhmah. Are you asleep over there? Hello? Give him a stool. Listen, boy, that's not going to work with me, okay? Either you pay attention or you have to go to another class, alright? I'm not going to have that sort of thing, alright? This is the Rebbe that the inyan from Pnimis HaChokhmah is Pnimis HaKeser Mamish, and that's not Lefi Seder HaSeichel. We can't really understand how that could be, and it's not Alidei Timtum, no, das is Kilu HaAtzmas, but what you might call also in the form of a nakuda. But that's another idea of the nakuda. You know, if you sometimes take a magnifying glass and you intensify all the pnimis of the magnifying glass in one place, then it burns a hole, because like the whole intensity of the light going through the magnifying glass intensifies in one. It's just like the whole essentiality of the light, how it reaches the magnifying glass becomes one essential nakuda, and that means that the whole atzmus of the shemesh has come into one nakuda mamish, as it were. But the way of that function of the glass is brought the whole essentiality into one nakuda. But that's another form of nakuda, and that's a nakuda pnimis of Chokhmah. That's what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya in Perek Lamed Vav, in the famous Haggadah there. He says that the inyan from Ein Oirin Seif Meir B'Kol HaAtzilus El Alidei Yislabshusi B'Chokhmah Tchila, and he says Ki HaChokhmah Hi Echad HaEmes V'Hu Levad V'Ein Zu Losei Zu Hi Madreiges HaChokhmah. That the inyan from Chokhmah in Chokhmah is appears Hu Levad V'Ein Zu Losei, but that's inyan from Atzmas Ein Seif Mamish. How you come to Zayin? Well, that's an inyan that he said Shemait. Look over there, and you'll see the Alter Rebbe writes the same thing. He writes Shemait in Mimoyer Rizal. klingt das wie der Rabbeinu Chaim says that he heard from the Arizal Shamaytim Himayrizal. However, that's a Ainian Pnimi Va'atzmi, which is not Al Piseda Harogil, and therefore he says that that's the Indian from Pnimis HaChochma. Or Chitainis HaChochma, something which should become a Nakuda, which is Yeshai to open itself out into Bina. Or for that, you have to have a Nakuda, another sort of Nakuda. Dainu, a Nakuda Claudius, Ali that you took away the atzmius of what you might call the ain't safeness, how do you call it, the bleak wool of the oil, and you left behind a form of a Indian, which albeit is like a kitzer of the whole arichas, but it's a very limited and how do you call it, intensified nakuda regarding what's going to come out later. But it's not the intensity of the whole atmos, because it came through the tzimtzum, like I said, of the atmos. And the Pharaoh says the Rebbe, well, those are two inyanim. Or that inyan that the pnimis hachachma appears l'shalei alidei tzimtzum, or that's another inyan, and that's pnimis abahi pnimis atik. And therefore it's mavur in some of our and iron based bariches. Atik is inyan from tainuk. Atik is shaita the koyach tainuk. Really, the union of Chochmah is a form of Gilui Koyach HaOinig. It's like that the Oinig, the essential power of the Nefesh, to be Misanaik, yet to feel this unbelievable fulfillment of Oinig, comes into, and Seichel is like a beginning of the whole Koyach of Oinig in a tremendous Tzimtzum. And so that comes in the form of Tzimtzum Atzmi, which is not Tzimtzum but Derech Sila. And that's Pnimis Atik, Pnimis of the Indian of a Ha'ora, which is Shai to say the Ishtausha, does Tavki through Tzimtzum, Benim Shapuchinas Ha'ora Levad. Once you've had that Tzimtzum Ha'atzmas, then the Nakud is only like a Ha'ora. It's just that since it's come in the form of a leftover from a tremendous Gilui Ein Seifi, therefore it's in the form of a Nakuda. Of a Be'emes, it's a Ha'ora Bil, it's a Ha'ora Bilva. Bezehu, he says, and that's what's brought down in the famous portion of the Zohar Kodesh, where it's right near the end of the Zohar, in the Hidra Rabbah, where Rabbi Shimon talks about the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim and the Shaykhs that they have to the different spheres. He writes over there that Abba Yoinek Mi Mazlo, that the Indian of Chochmah literally nurtures from a Mazal. And it's known that when the Zohar Kodesh uses the word Mazel, it means a marshal of the Indian of Cyrus, like hairs. And this is the Shaykhs, to a certain extent, of the Indian of Keser and Pnimis HaChochmah, well, not Pnimis HaChochmah, where the Indian of Chochmah with the Indian of the hairs of the head, and also the hairs of the Zokeh, the beard. So the Indian is that Chochmah is Yoinek from a Mazal, and that Mazal is the Indian of Mazolis and Cyrus, the marshal of hairs. Now the Indian of that portion of the Zohar says that Chochmah is Yoinek from the Mazel, and it calls over there the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim, it calls them Mazoles. And it says that Abba is Yoinek from the Mazel of Noiter Chesed La'alofim. The Mazel Noiter, well, that's where Chochmah is, the Mazel Ches, that's actually the eighth Mazel, that's where Chochmah is Yoinek. And there's a whole period, instead of wide open from the Indian Mazel, which is called Noiter. Well, that's another Indian was saying Karamohim to go into it. However, why do we say that Chochmah has its nurturement from something which is called like a hair, a saira, and the mazoles are called like sairas? Now, why would they be called mazoles? Because the Indian of mazoles is another name, for example, for the heavenly bodies, or the what you might call planets, or things of that nature, are called mazoles. So we see, according to the Rambam in the Elul, you say the HaTorah, the Rambam says that the mazoles are just like media, where they take hashpur from the heavens higher, and they just pass it over, and it goes down and becomes more shayat to the lower Olam. That's what he calls the planets in the form of mazolas.
Does that mean he thinks they're sort of simsum?
Huh?
Does that mean to say the Rambam holds the mazeres are simsum?
Yeah, well, we'll see. Pnimisay in the have a shaykhus to Tzimtzum. Yeah. And we're going to see it's quite a large symptom, because they take the ruchnistika hashpor, the ruchnis of the malachim is over there, and they pass it down into hashpor gashmis almost into the lower olam, till eventually it becomes hashpor gashmis in the world. Edify. That's connected. Therefore, these mazolas are called silas. Well, I don't like you playing with the silas on your arm. It'd be perfectly all right without you playing with them.
Trying to make the Yugos below.
Yeah, the other tirutim, we'll say them for another time. Mazolas u'sayres, he said, the inyan ha'sayres hu amshocha b'derech dilug v'hefsek al gulgeilus, shehi ha'ora shebaina roich chamish kosev mochimacher. In other words, how does it's brought down in Siddur that the hairs of the head, they are really, their shoirish is in the moya, that they really grow and they draw a certain, how do you call it, unique on the brain. But there's a big interruption between the hair on the outside and the brain, and that's called the skull bone. That's called gulgeilus, the etzem gulgeilus. So what's written is that the hairs grow, and the way they grow from the brain at the beginning is that they're very pneumistic shefa. They're like almost an atzmistic shefa. They're very, they have the whole atzmis of the moyach in them. But when they hit the gulgeilus, it's like they hit a big hefsek. Because the gulgeilus is like a bone. It's like a very heavy material, and they have to literally split through the bone. They got to jump through the bone. Well, that's like the oyer having to break through the tzimtzum. But the oyer comes to the tzimtzum, and the tzimtzum, as it were, being a withdrawal, interrupts the flow of the oyer. And what's on the other side is only like a ha'ora bilvat. So the same with the sayres hit the etzem gulgeilus, and therefore what actually comes out as a gilui in the head, in the hairs of the head, is only a inyan from what we call ha'ora, which is bo b'derech dilug v'hefsek. It comes by way of jumping and through a interruption. And therefore he says, that's the inyan of the sayres. Kamoi keinu amshocha b'chinas chochma. Ha'ora ha'bo b'chinas dilug v'hefseka, tzimtzum we explained before, which is very similar to the tzimtzum Rishain, but it's still like a big hefsek, and the inyan of Chochmah is called a unique from the mazal of Noitzer. In other words, it's a mazal from the Yud Gimel Midas Rachmim, and it's unique from that mazal because it comes through Dilug V'Hefseka Tzimtzum. V'aymash Kosev Mochimacher Pa'agoyes La'biyu Bo'eira Tovku Samech. That's a mimer from the Alter Rebbe in Sefer, which I didn't have, it's not available to me right now, so therefore I wasn't able to see what is exactly the reference over there. V'ainu k'moishen is burli yil, d'amshoches ha'chochma milmayla me'achokma, hu b'chinas toimeach. Remember in the previous mimer, we learned at great length that the inyan of chochma to atzilas, from chochma how it is in Chochmah Stimoya, Pnimis Chochmah Stimoya, how it is in Arik, except that's only Kocha Atzoimeir Bilvat, the way it comes out in the, and there's one on Lamaila, the four levels of Doimim, Tzomeir, Chai, and Medaber are also there. So the inyan from Chochmah is called Tzomeir, even though it's such a very high madriga, and Chai is the inyan of Chochmah Shebekesa, the inyan from Chochmah Stimoya, and then Kesa Mamish, that's called Medaber. That's the level of Daber. Remember we had that mentioned several times in the Maimah B'Shmini Atzeres, that the Gilui of Chochmah B'Atzilas is called Koyach HaTzoimeach Bilvad, which means that it's come through a whole inyan of Tzimtzum and Dilug of Tzimtzum. Just like when a plant grows out through the ground, it has to break through the surface of the ground, etc. So the Rebbe says, "V'hinei b'dei liyesh amshochas hachachma hu aridei zerusa delatata." So here's the fascinating thing: in order that whole process should occur, in other words, there should be a inyan from Gilei hachachma l'mayla alidei der minyan from mazel v'neiter. It should come with the inyan from Abba. Should be miskala from the mazala with the whole inyan through the inyan from Tzimtzum Godel. He said that's all totally in the Avedas of Adam Lamata. Totally in the Yisrus Telatat or the Aveda of Yidin Lamata. So it might say that. I think the Eivster makes all these inyanim. So therefore it's going on a famous statement of the Arizal over there in the, we're going to say the Chaim Vital V'Shem Arizal. That he says that everything that the Eivster made at the beginning, Ein Hanami, was Chofetz Chesedu. He made it mitzad himself. Everything is dependent in the Aveda of the Bnei Adam Harayala. Lamata, they got to be ma'ir and mamshik the inyan that it should be all the Giluim Harayala Lamayla. Yisrus the Le'elam. It's at the Eivster, all Tolu in Yisrus the in other words, that there should be the inyan from Gilei the Chochmah D'Atzilus. So you might say, what does interest me, Chochmah D'Atzilus? So the answer is, if we weren't Chochmah D'Atzilus, then you wouldn't be sitting there, even nodding your eyes in such a weary way. You wouldn't be sitting there. You need the inyan from Chochmah D'Atzilus. And the Father says the Rebbe that there should be that Gilui v'derech Tzimtzum of the Chitzonius HaChochmah to bring about Chochmah outside to Seidish D'Atzilus. Well, that has to be Davke through Israel, Tata through the Avedas Adam. How? If it is bitul in a form of self, how do you call it, nullification, bitul, Dahanochas Atzmusei Davke. But Hanochas Atzmusei means putting yourself aside altogether. Completely and utterly laying yourself aside. Bitul, Mikova. So we see that in order for the Eivster to bring about that Gilei HaChochmah Shalamayla, the Eivster had to be, as it were, he had to be Masalik, his whole self aside. There had to be put away the whole Ha'atzmus on a side, that he should have this Mochi of the Nakuda. So similarly, if you wanted the world should keep going, you wanted things should be how they should be, there should be Gilei Elokus in the world, then you have to put yourself aside. You have to be in a form of Hanochas Atzmusei. Now we're now going to enter into an explanation in order to understand the inyan of Hanochas Atzmusei. We're going to go through a few little levels of different Fani Aveda until we reach the point of Hanochas Atzmusei. So we see that it's not such a simple story. And if you want a Tosefes Piyur B'zeh, and you look up in Tanya, Perek Mem Tes, you see that's what the Alter Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe says over there that the Eivster made a Tzimtzum, Godel V'Yatzum, in order to bring about the elements. What's the Aveda, the Adam? What does he have to do? He has to put himself aside, Legamrei, and be Metzamtzim, Mesatzim, B'Kol Inyanov, as they state dort in. That's what's written here. V'Even Achech of it's basically the same nakuda. There's a sort of bittul which comes through understanding and reflection. In other words, what you might call a gishmak bittul. Right? You understand something and you misbinding in it. It makes a lot of sense to you. And so therefore the bittul of that is what we call hergish oyer eloki. You feel divine light, you feel dominating, you feel divine. Why shouldn't you be bottled? So you give yourself over to that divine eloki, to that divine light that you felt. He's got a tremendous rotzen and a desire for Elokus, ulahipach leachfaya l'sitra acher. Anything which is from sitra acher, anything which is not Elokus, he wants to bend it over and break it. What does that mean? Kol mashu ulahipach me'Elokus. Everything which is Heipach, me, Elikus, he doesn't want it, he wants to break it, he will be something to tome it them. And that's all because there's this Hergish, and this desire for Elikus. And that's called Bittel. But we'll see that that's not Emes of Bittel, that's a Bittel. Oh, that's Bittel, because you want to be Bittel, you feel Elikus. You be Masik Elikus, you was Beinan, you understood the greatness of Elikus, why shouldn't you want to be Bittel? Oh, but it's not called Hanochas Atzmusai. However, that only brings down certain levels, but doesn't bring down the original appearance of Chok. And he said, in that Kufa, having a Hergish and a Yisraelis and Elikus, which comes mitzad Avona Vasogi and Elikus, or in that there's two different manners or forms. We'll see about that as we go along, that the two forms of his bonaness, one higher than the other, but they all remain in the general picture of his bonaness. If I mean the Rotzen and the Hergish that the Mensch has, is all connected with what he really appreciated. However, there's one Indian from our which is poor, like we saw, Indian from Mamali Kolam Mamish, which comes Lafi Seder Ishtaushas Hilames, and then there's another Indian of being misbeinen in the earth, there's a mufla not mamish makiv, and that elevates you to a much higher form of heritage. But it doesn't cause you to be completely mavatl yourself altogether. And even if in Hanochas Atzmusai, we're going to see that's a under. That's a call it. And a kuda menayu. Upay mamish toif pnimis Adam mamish is that's in a Moshiach. In a Moshiach is an office Atzmusai altogether. Some people think Chabad, Chabad, wonderful. These amazing revelations, divine understanding, philosophy. That's one in Chabad. And there's another in Chabad, complete giving away of itself. The Rebbe said, you have to stand on your head. But appreciate it. Isn't it? Eh?
Yeah.
I mean, can you hear? So what we're going to do is get through to these guys from laying around in the rooms, shopping and going around and having all sorts of terutim. Nicht von dem, that we bring in Mashiach. So.